Hello, friends. This is Dave Hurwitz, executive editor at ClassicsToday.com, here to talk about the best and the worst versions of Janáček's incredible Sinfonietta. Now, Janáček was such a unique and distinctive composer. I want to give a little overview of the work first, just sort of the way he operates, so you can navigate it. You know, people listen to this piece. It's pretty popular. It's been recorded lots of times. It's only about 22 to 24 minutes long. Janáček called it Sinfonietta, or Little Symphony. But it's not little at all. It's in 5 movements, and it's scored for, among other things, 14 trumpets. Yes, 14 trumpets. You have an initial fanfare group that has 9 regular trumpets, plus 2 bass trumpets, plus 2 tenor tubas, and then 3 additional trumpets in the orchestra. And in the last movement, it all comes together in a huge phantasmagoria of triumphant noise that's absolutely one of the most thrilling things in the entire orchestral repertoire. It's an amazing, amazing piece of music. And considering how difficult it is to get together 14 trumpeters on any given day, plus 2 tenor tubists, it gets performed and recorded a lot. Now, it is true, you can get away with using only 6 trumpets if you kind of move the parts around a little bit. I think you can sort of do it. I mean, I was looking at the score the other day. I have it like right here. And you can sort of wing it, but that's cheating. And I don't like cheating. And there are 2 conductors who cheated, who I know cheated, because I saw them do it. Well, one of them who I was told he did it, and the other one I'm sure did it because I saw it. One of them was Dochnani, which I assume he cheated on his recording, which was coupled to like Dvorak's 6th. And the other was George Szell, who gets one of my nominations for most crappy performance of the Sinfonietta. And you wouldn't think it's Szell. Oh my God, it's Szell, the great Szell. Well, everybody has their bad days. And we're going to talk about a little bit more why Szell's performance is so horrible. It's not the most horrible, because like everything he did is very well played, but it's horrible. Janáček was a composer. He died in 1928. He was 74 years old. He wrote virtually everything that matters in the last decade of his life, from like 1917, 18 to 1928. It's astonishing. And a lot of music in that decade. I mean, there are like 5 operas and the Glagolitic Mass and his 2 string quartets and a host of other chamber works and his 2 big orchestral masterpieces, Taras Bulba, the Rhapsody, and the Sinfonietta. So it's like, wow, he was busy. He was really, really busy. And during that decade, he evolved a style which is unlike anything else in music. It is so amazing. And you know, it's the wonderful thing about it, quite frankly, is that it's unanalyzable in the strict musicological sense. I mean, I've never seen anybody attempt to explain why it works. Usually, you know, in a normal piece of music, like a Brahms symphony, you could do a harmonic analysis and you say, okay, he does this and this does that, and this is related to this, and you know, and for that reason, the piece has the coherence and dramatic whatever, and it's successful. And Janáček, none of that applies. None of it applies at all. It just does what it does, and nobody's quite sure why it does it. But what it does is amazing, because Janáček was not a contrapuntal composer. He didn't really combine, you know, melodies in strict sense. He did do it in an informal way, as he did everything. He was not a colorist in the strict sense of the term either. I mean, he was attracted to very strange orchestral sonorities. So he was a chord guy in that sense. But his textures and his approach to everything, there's nothing like it. And the Sinfonietta is his biggest orchestral work, and it really illustrates his late technique. You know, in his later works, he even tried to minimize the number of instruments he was using. I mean, he didn't want any excess, no fat in his scores, even if he's using 14 trumpets. He wanted a lean sonority, and so he took to drawing his own music staves because it took more work that way, and he figured he wouldn't get, he wouldn't write more staves than he actually needed. And the result looks so weird. First of all, his manuscripts are indecipherable. They look like, what they call fly shit. I hate to say it, but, just like a mess on a page. But if you look at the score here, you see that most of it, let me just give you an example. Here's a typical page. You've got this huge orchestra going, but you have 3 systems of 5 lines each, or 4 lines each. It's unbelievable. It looks like there's nothing happening. But then you play it, or you listen to it, and it's just like a volcano going off. It's incredible how much life and energy there is. And in addition, his melodic inspiration was also very peculiar. It was clearly based on the modalities of Czech folk music, but he wrote very few long tunes. He was not a tune guy. He based his musical materials on the speech rhythms of the Czech language, which are quite unusual. They tend to have clusters of teeny notes at the end. Like, there's a famous one in the opera The Mccarris case. It goes bum bum ba ba dum, and as a result of that, they tend to be short, punchy little motives with abrupt endings. This happens to be marvelous to create musical continuity for, because they never seem to quite end. They don't have a satisfying ending. They end with a rush at the end that pushes you on to the next repetition, because that's what he did. He repeated things, but he repeated them in such a fascinating way that you're not even sure he's repeating them sometimes. I want to actually do an example of that. I want to show you what I mean with the central movement of the Sinfonietta. I have recordings. I have permission to use recordings from Superfon, so we're going to use a couple of those, and we're going to use the Naxos recording with Anthony Vitt, both of which are magnificent, and the Superfon recording is Gilek with the Brno Orchestra, which was Janáček's hometown team, and we're going to take apart just a little bit, just for a minute, the central movement, the slow movement of the Sinfonietta. And then we'll talk about performances. And so we'll listen to some other bits too. This is just such cool music. So let's start with the middle movement, all right? The entire movement is based on a 10-note module. It goes da-da-da-da, ba-da-da-da-da-da, something like that. That's it. It's ba-dum, 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 4 and 6. That's all you need to know about it. And underneath that, there is an arpeggio. Dum, bum, 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 bum. That's it. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, or da, 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 or 8. 7 or 8 notes underneath. And this little complexlet, I would call it, is the substance of the entire movement. And what I've done is I've taken sort of the opening minute so that you can hear how he just takes this tiny, tiny little idea. Da-da-da-dum, ba-da-da-da-da-dum. That's it. 10 notes, and with the thing underneath going do-do-do-do-do-do-do. And he just repeats it over and over again. But each time he repeats it, he gives it a completely different coloration, harmonization. It has a totally different mood. It's kind of amazing. And then I'm going to play it. First, let's just listen to it. What I've done is I've taken the first minute and I've inserted a little pause of half a second between each iteration of this. So it's going to sound very jerky. But I just want you to hear how many different colors and feelings he gets from this dreamy little motive that the entire symphony is based on. So let's just listen to that, shall we? This is the Vitt performance on Naxos. Okay, you hear. It's just the same thing repeated. It's as simple as can be, right? Now, I want you to just hear it the way he wrote it, with everything attached, because he creates the most marvelous forward-moving continuity. And you look forward to every appearance of this tiny little motive, because he seems to be able to get just an infinite variety of mood and atmosphere out of it. And the feeling is always directly vocal and emotional and expressive, all the time, in everything that he did. But it's so free, it's so improvisational, you don't know what's going to happen next. So listen to the same passage, exactly the same passage. So that's how it all comes together. And then the next passage, I also am going to play because it's equally fascinating. It sounds like a completely different idea, a totally separate episode, and it is, but it's based on exactly the same original concept. Listen to this. This is for trombones and flute and piccolo. I mean, those are the only instruments involved. Just listen. Now, what was that? It's the second half of the initial motive, the 6-note one, but-um, right? Because that's all the motives, all the trombones are doing. Dun-dun, 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 bum-bum, bum-bum, bum-bum. That's it. It's the second half of it, and between it, the woodwinds are going like that. That's the 8 or 7 or 8 note arpeggio thing underneath the original motive. Do 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 do. So it's dum bum 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 like that. That's all it is. It's exactly the same stuff. It's just detached and played differently. It's just incredible how much variety Janáček gets out of this. But because this is how he works, his movements tend to be rather short because the material from which they're composed is very short. So he doesn't write at length. He has no excess anywhere. But the thing about them is that even though they tend to be short, they sound big. There's a lot of feeling packed into them. They're dense. they're expressively dense. So you never feel like you're getting shortchanged, even when it's a teeny tiny little movement, only a couple minutes long. It's really astonishing how that works. It really is. And for example, I mean, that we're talking about that. Some of the other things he does. Let's start with the opening of the Sinfonietta. This is, again, the Vitt performance. It's an incredible, incredible fanfare for that, assortment of 9 trumpets, 2 bass trumpets, and 2 tenor tubas and timpani. That's what it's written for. And it just sounds, it was used, by the way, by Emerson, Lake and Palmer in their song Knife Edge. If you like Emerson, Lake and Palmer, they did wonderful things with classical music. Probably the coolest was their arrangement of the final toccata from Hinastera's first piano concerto, with Hinastera's permission, by the way. But they used the opening fanfare for this song, Knife Edge. It's so arresting, immediately arresting. And this repetition of things underneath with the constant small variations of the initial melodic motives is just Janáček's personal technique. And there's no way to explain why it works as well as it does. It just does. Here's a bit of the opening fanfare. Just instantly like, wow, you listen to it, you just go, I've never heard anything like that before. I mean, what is that? It's incredible. And then the second movement I want to play a little bit of, because the other thing that Janáček does, which creates unbelievable tension and excitement in his music, is, first of all, really fast-moving ostinatos. That is, repeated rhythmic figures. Usually it's one that goes like that. So it's churning, it's running like a motor. It's always going. But you listen to the opening of the second movement, and it's the kind of thing that drives you to the score. You want to say, what is making that noise? How does he get that sound? What is it? I mean, it's incredible. Listen to the opening. This is the Gilek performance from Burnout, and I'm playing it because even though Gilek doesn't have the best orchestra at his hands, they know how to make the right sounds, and that counts for so much in Janáček. In that way, he's a chord guy. He doesn't particularly like sensuous sounds. He likes weird sounds, unusual sounds. And I'll tell you what the initial sound is after we listen to it. So listen to the opening of the second movement. What is that opening? What is doing that? So, you go and you look at your score. Here it is. We take the little score and, oh, okay, it's 2 clarinets. They're doing a couple of bassoons, doubling 4 muted trombones. I mean, who would come up with that kind of a sound? 4 muted trombones in their lowest bass register. So it's, and then the pizzicato strings going plonk, while the clarinets are going. I mean, it's a completely original sonic concept, and he was very impractical in his sonic concepts. He didn't really care if the orchestra could do it or not. He just wrote it and assumed that they would do it. In the climax of this particular movement, where that ostinato, that really gets whirring up, he gives the top 2 notes of it It's doo-doo, 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 like that, to the horns in their highest possible register. The French horns are screaming, and everybody else is just going, water, but the horns are doing it on the top two notes, and then the trumpets come blasting in, and then there's this huge climax where the tension just spills over. It's unbelievable how much tension he generates that way. And I want you to hear that passage too, and you'll see exactly what I mean. So from all of this, it should be clear to you that a great performance of this piece absolutely demands that the orchestra be able to make these crazy sounds without any kind of shame. You just have to do what he tells you to do. And you can't prettify it. It needs to sound rough. It needs to have some edge. It can't be prettified. And then there's the question of tempo. Tempo in Janáček, I don't think there's any composer, frankly, whose speeds vary as much as Janáček does, because first of all, it's always fluid. It changes all the time, his speeds. And second of all, they all seem to be the same. I mean, if you take a look at the Sinfonietta, here's the Vitt performance that we were listening to. They're marked, here are the 5 movements. It's allegretto, andante, moderato, allegretto, and andante con moto. In other words, it's like the same speed. I mean, it's always moderate. You've got allegretto, which is not quite fast, then you've got andante, which is not quite slow, then you've got moderato, which is moderate, then you've got allegretto again, then you've got andante con moto, which is not quite slow but moving. I mean, what does that mean? How does that help? I mean, you have to figure it out, really, based on the internal movement by those ostinatos going boo-doo-doo-doo-doo-doo-doo. And then, and figure out what sounds natural. It always has to move, but it always has to move with this natural athleticism. That is absolutely key. Absolutely key. And then, there's some very tricky rhythms. The climax of the second movement is in 13/8. I mean, 13/8? Who's going to count that? And it's a fast 13/8. And the reason is because of those tunes that end with short notes. The tune is da 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 dum ba dum. Well, that bum, that's the 13. It's really crazy, but he changes it all the time. The rhythm isn't all changes constantly. It's really, really original music that's very, very difficult to do well. So it makes sense to think that a lot of the best performances are going to be Czech. So now let's start talking about recordings. First, the crappy ones. As I said, Zell. The poor man. The trouble with Zell is that he can't let go. He's much too much of a control freak for Janáček. And the result is a performance that sounds, first of all, it's terribly prettified, which is bad. You don't want pretty with Janáček. You want emotional honesty. And if he wants it to sound gnarly, it should sound gnarly and strange. Second of all, he's much too rhythmically rigid. The rhythms always have to swing and flow and sound spontaneous, like speech, as speech does, as talking does. When it's going da 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 da, ya da 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 dum. I mean, you can't have to count to 13 when you're playing that. That's a bad thing. And with Zell, you can hear him counting. I'm telling you. So that's not very good. That's not very good. Then we have, Simon Rattle with the Philharmonia. Now, he redid it with the London Symphony very, very recently. It's quite a bit better. But his original recording with the Philharmonia, nauseating, awful. Completely unidiomatic and wrong in so many ways I can't even begin to describe them. But the worst ever Janáček Sinfonietta guy, and he played it quite a bit, was Jascha Horenstein. Oh my God. First of all, his recordings were all like 1950s bad sound. And he had like the Vienna Pro Musica, some pickup Vienna group. And thirdly, he couldn't conduct it. He just couldn't conduct it. I mean, he is a combination of slovenliness of execution with complete rigidity of tempo, and the result is as totally unidiomatic and unconvincing as anybody has ever played anything. So if you see the cheap Horenstein recordings on Vox or pirate labels or some live things he did, I don't know, avoid like death. They are beyond horrible. And he did a lot of Janáček, and it was all beyond horrible. His Janáček is gross, just gross. So those are like my three top awful ones. Then there are a lot of sort of averagey ones. Those include some of the ones done by very major orchestras. There's like Ozawa, there are the two Claudio Abbados, there's Andre Previn. They're good. I mean, they're good. They play the music, and it's interesting. But, it's not as convincing as the best performances. And so I tend not to worry about them. Dochnani was another one of those with his 6 miserable trumpets. I really think, what I've done here is I've listed sort of my top 10 really, really good ones. And there are a lot of really good ones too, but these are, I think, the best. Let's see, which one is this? Oh, this is an example of the fact that the Czechs also sometimes only manage to be in the fair to Midland section. This one is with Bělohlavek of the Czech Philharmonic on Chandos. Bělohlavek's Chandos recordings were somewhat pale. He was, as I've said before, a nice guy. And Janáček is not nice music always. And so his performances tend to be a little bit soft-edged. They just don't have the guts that the music needs, the balls, They don't hit hard enough. And this is a good performance, but not a great one with the Czech Philharmonic. So you can't always assume that the Czech performances will be really good. I mean, there was a recent one with Tomáš Netopil, which was just awful. So, it really depends. The hometown team doesn't always come through. But let's talk about the other really fine performances now, so that we can, and you can pick the ones you want from in this group, although I will, of course, deliver my verdict on the favorite. First of all, this is Antony Vitt with the Warsaw Philharmonic on Naxos. We've just heard some of it. Among these slower performances, this is the best. It really is. It's really first class, or one of the best. I mean, it's not slow in any absolute sense. It's not a trudgy performance. It moves. It's beautiful. It's fabulously well played, as you heard yourself, and beautifully recorded. So Antony Vitt on Naxos is a great deal, and it comes with a fabulous glagolitic mass. The couplings for the Sinfonietta, because it's only 22 minutes long, can be a little bit incestuous. You wind up with a lot of the same stuff. Usually it comes with Taras Bulba, and if not Taras Bulba, then some other Janáček, like the glagolitic mass. But other popular couplings are like the Bartók Concerto for Orchestra, some other Slavic thing, a Dvorak symphony, something else that's Czech. You can find it that way. That's usually how you get it. So you're going to wind up with a mixture of things. And the other thing about these discs that I'm talking about is that they're all really good in terms of the couplings as well. So you get good, complete discs rather than just, the Sinfonietta and then something else you don't want that's lousy. All right, next, this is a wonderful one. This is Václav Neumann with the Czech Philharmonic. Now, Neumann sort of always gets second place to Antrel, but maybe he wasn't as great as Antrel. I don't know. I mean, it really depends on what they were playing. As always, you have to take it on a case by case basis. But this is digital sound. It's sort of the Czech Philharmonic, really sounding still like the Czech Philharmonic. They don't sound like this anymore. They don't play like this anymore. They've become, like so many orchestras, much more internationalized in their sound, although there are still authentic elements, you might call the string timbre, the nice vibrato-laden trumpets, the piercing timbres, because Janáček is a high composer. He writes things in the very, very highest registers of everybody, the strings, the winds, the piccolos, the horns, the trumpets, except for the trombones. They go way, way down on the bottom. But this is a superb, superb collection. You've got the Wandering of a Little Soul Violin Concerto, which was the actual original overture to From the House of the Dead in its sort of violin concerto format. It's a single movement, like 10 minutes long. And then the Sinfonietta, Taras Bulba, and his incidental music to Schluck und Jau, which is very late, like 2 movements of incidental music that's fabulous. It's just fabulous. If you haven't heard it, you really should. It's vintage late Janáček. Really, really cool sounding. So Neumann is a very good choice. Then we have 3 recordings by Charles Mccarris. Charles Mccarris was, of course, the Janáček guy of the 20th century. He studied under Václav Talich in Prague. He absolutely had the idiom, and he recorded them 3 times. His best recording, which we're going to get to in a minute, is his last one with the Czech Philharmonic. However, let's talk about the others. First, the most famous one that he did, the one that everybody knows, is this one with the Vienna Philharmonic. Now, the Vienna Philharmonic, even though they live only like, an hour and a half away from Prague, was not an echt Janáček orchestra. Mccarris got them to play marvelously in the operas, but you could tell because there were moments in, for example, the Jealousy Overture to Yennefer, the opera where the trumpets just crack. They just lose it at the end of the overture. I mean, Janáček was not easy for them to do, but when they did it, the struggle was worth it because that sense of struggle is part of the music, right? But when he made these 2 recordings of Taras Bulba and Sinfonietta, they were really sort of promoted as digital blockbusters. And there's a certain heaviness to the sound. The tempos are a little bit slower than Mccarris normally did, and the timbres are somewhat heavier. It's not the true Janáček style, but the performances themselves are very, very good, of their type, of the Vienna Janáček sort of sound that Mccarris was aiming for here. And in these recordings, by the way, in this recording of the Sinfonietta, he made a few textural adjustments. There's a cymbal crash in a different place in the last movement. The piccolos are an octave higher in that passage I played you from the middle movement with the trombones. He replaces the bells with a glockenspiel in a couple places because you never know what Janáček wanted when he wrote bell sounds. Sometimes he didn't even indicate pitches, as he did not in the 4th movement of the Sinfonietta. It's very funny. In some places, you don't know what the pitch is supposed to be. Sometimes they use tubular bells. Sometimes they use glockenspiel. You'll get what you get. But these are very, very good, but they're not my favorite from Mccarris. Previously, with the Pro Arte Orchestra, which is a pickup ensemble, and the Philharmonia, now on Testament, Mccarris did the Sinfonietta, and it was a revelation in terms of sinfoniettadom, someone who really knew how the music should go. And if you play this next to like Horenstein from around the same period, you will see just how horrible Horenstein really is. But this is a very, very good one with the Pro Arte Orchestra. I mean, they're a little bit, it was from 1960. 1960. It's a little rough and ready, but like I said, rough and ready is okay in Janáček. It really is okay. It doesn't need polish. It needs integrity. It needs honesty. And okay, so that's good. And you also get the 4 opera preludes. Oh my God, they're wonderful. These 4 overtures, the Micropolis case, Copacabana from the House of the Dead, and Jealousy, the original overture to Yennefer with the trumpets that don't crack at the end in this performance, unlike in Vienna. Plus, there's like a whole bunch of other things that he did here. Ionescu's Romanian Rhapsody No. 1, Bartok's Romanian folk dances, a Dvorak Slavonic dance, a couple Brahms Hungarian dances. It's a wonderful disc to have as a souvenir of early Mccarris. Next, a really underrated, marvelous Janáček collection. This one with José Cerebrier. This is a great 2-disc on reference recordings, stunning sonics. You get the Sinfonietta, the Lachian dances, Taras Bulba, the Cunning Little Vixen Suite, the Talich arrangement, by the way, not the Mccarris arrangement, which is sort of the original one, which we'll get to in a moment, the Jealousy Overture, the Prelude to From the House of the Dead, and Cerebrier was asked by Universal Edition to make his own suite from the opera The Micropolis Case, which he did, and it's quite good. It's really quite good. And these performances are with the Czech State Philharmonic of Brno. Brno, Janáček's hometown team. They are wonderful. They're really, really good. I don't understand why no one ever mentions them. But they're on reference recordings. It's a 2-disc, 2 for the price of 1. It's a great deal. You really should consider these. They are really first class. Good for you, Maestro Cerebrier. He really nailed it. And then here is the disc that we played some samples from. This is the Burnout Philharmonic, which may be the Czech State Philharmonic of Brno. Who the hell knows? Somebody can tell me, I'm sure. This is with František Žižek. Now, Žižek was also a Janáček expert, a wonderful Janáček conductor. He did some opera suites of his own that we're going to talk about in a different talk. They're marvelous. And like I said, this is the hometown team. The sonics are not as good as some of these other performances, but they're perfectly acceptable, decent stereo, and the playing is, it's like I said, raw and edgy for music, which is also raw and edgy and just incredibly expressive. I mean, Janáček's pieces, they're like a living organism. They just sort of pulsate and they should just thrive organically. They should grow like a weed when you hear them. They're like wild things, you know, like, oh, they're so great. It's great. So then we have the last Mccarris. This was his last recording. This is a bunch of live recordings with the Czech Philharmonic. It's really all the major Janáček orchestral music on 2 discs. You can get it here. I have it also, wait a minute, because I have them sitting here. Dvorak, Smetana, Janáček, Martinu. Okay. It's also in this box of Mccarris super fun recordings. There are 2 boxes. There's Dvorak, Smetana, Janáček, and Martinu. And you should have them. I mean, you should really have them. They're let's see, 4 discs plus a DVD, where you get on DVD the Glagolitic Mass and Taras Bulba and the Overture to Yennefer. Now I'm just going to tell you what the other one is here. You get a whole pile of Dvorak, Symphonies 6, 8, and 9, the Slavonic Dances, the Symphonic Variations, the Legends, Scherzo Capriccioso, In Nature's Realm, the 4 Symphonic Poems, and Smetana's Mavlast. I mean, if you don't own these, you do not have Czech music. You must have these. But these are with the Czech Philharmonic for the most part, and there's also some Prague Philharmonic, the Prague Radio Symphony Orchestra also. But this is Mccarris' best version of the Sinfonietta. That's what we're talking about. And put these away and take out this one. You see, these things just accumulate over time. But these 2 discs of Janáček by Mccarris are really the ones you need to have. They're fantastic. But of course, we mentioned already, and we must talk about Karel Ančerl. Now, this is a wonderful, by the way, disc, this Ančerl Gold one, because you get the Sinfonietta with 2 pieces by Martinu, the Frescoes of Piero della Francesca, and the Parables, and they're great pieces. Oh my God, they're so wonderful. This is a fantastic coupling. It's very interesting when you listen to this performance. Ančerl is also one of the slower ones. It's closer to Vitt, which he uses the tempo in order to let you hear more. It's not slow because it sounds like it's dragging. It's slow so you catch the rhythms. You know, the rhythms, you know, the rhythm. It really gallops. But, you know, in modern performances, and in, you know, like Cerebriers, for example, you'll hear in the opening fanfare the timpani really pound. Bum, 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 bum. You know, they're whacking the crap out of the drums. The Czech Philharmonic timpani traditionally were very soft in intonation. It's a much more musical sound and not hard at all. And you hear that in this performance. Some people, for that reason, go, the timpani aren't loud enough. No, they're fine. It's absolutely fine. However, I have to tell you my fave. And my fave, believe it or not, is not a Czech. Well, it's half Czech. It's a Czech conductor, not Czech orchestra. Kubelik on Deutsche Grammophon. I mean, this is a classic recording. It was Sinfonietta plus Taras Bulba. Here they also give you the Concertino and the Capriccio, because this is a Japanese edition. You can also get this on Australian Eloquence. They also have these performances, so you can get them that way, and they are exceptional. Now, Kubelik also did a live one that was on Orfeo of the Sinfonietta, coupled with Dvorak 6. It's also really, really good. But there's something special about this performance. There really is. First of all, it's recorded really well. I mean, his German radio engineering was always very good. And in this particular case, the trumpets, the massed trumpets in the fanfare sound so fabulous. And particularly at the end when they're combined with the rest of the orchestra, it's just the most glorious closing. And Kubelik's conducting is very, very interesting because it's absolutely straightforward. This is one of the fastest performances out there. It really flies, and it's so exciting. I mean, it's just incredibly exciting. It goes as if in one breath, the whole performance. You know, the tempo relationships are so perfectly judged. There aren't any awkward joins in terms of musical sections. It all just flows with inevitability that it just carries you away. It really does. So my favorite Sinfonietta remains, after all these years, Raphael Kubelik, even though there are many, many other great ones that have come along since. And any of these will serve you well for the Sinfonietta. I am not going to make an absolute statement about, I've told you what the lousy ones are. I pointed out the fact that there are a lot of mediocre ones, but there's a new series of Janáček orchestral music on Chandos with Edward Gardner and Bergen. It's very, very good. Very good. His Sinfonietta is also worth hearing. It's excellent. So Janáček does not have to be done by Czech orchestras in Czechoslovakia, although you really should hear it done by Czech orchestras in Czechoslovakia, or Czech Republic now, pardon me, so that you get a sense of that authentic quality, and that will allow you to triangulate other performances and judge how well they succeed or fail in that particular aspect. But there are others, and so I choose Raphael Kubelik. Still unbelievable. So anyway, I hope that this talk, it's been a long talk for a short piece, I know, but there's so much music in Janáček. It's so fascinating, and I hope you'll listen to it with a little bit more appreciation, not just for the sonic blockbuster qualities of the piece, but also for the unbelievable improvisational brilliance with which the whole thing is assembled. It's a miracle, Janáček's music, just a miracle. So keep on listening, folks. Thank you for joining me. Take care.